Hello and welcome to Wild Owl TV. So today is another gardening day. I haven't got much done so far because I've had a royal visit from some friends, and you'll see the picture on the page. But I am doing some gardening now. Now I just thought I'd just give you a little bit of a rundown on some of the plants that I'm putting into my garden this year. And this morning I'm going to get into trouble for it, but there we go. I've bought some more. And I went to Iron Acton Garden Centre, and the only reason I'm mentioning that is because they have a fantastic selection of wild flowers in their range. Now, when you go to some of these garden centres, they don't have specifically wild flowers. They're not obvious, but this garden centre really have got some fantastic flowers, really like they're almost famous names in the world of butterflies and bees and conservation. So I'm sure these flowers are available in other garden centres. If you've got a local one, then check with them, but certainly this is where I got them from. Now let me show you what I've bought today, because I'm really excited. Now they're only little examples. So greater knapweed, that's that one there. That is a really good famous flower for wildlife areas, and really good for birds and insects. I've got night flowering catchfly. I bought 3 of these. Night flowering catchfly. Now of course, because it's night flowering, that's going to be of great value to moths, and it's on the hit list for attracting moths into your garden. Bird's foot trefoil is a famous plant, and if I remember rightly, that is the food plant for the common blue butterfly, and that is a plant which really is always top of the list in terms of wildlife plants in your garden. Then we've got meadow clary, which is another nectar producing plant. And then I've also got we've got the cuckoo flower, which is another top plant that comes up in the list of butterfly plants. And foxing cups, so named because of the flowers and the buds apparently. So that's just really a pretty nectar plant. And then finally, teasels, which is a very good plant if you want goldfinches to come into your garden, because goldfinches will always head for teasels. You'll see them on top of teasels, and of course this is where the feeding of Niger seed comes from. So obviously a lot of these plants will spread, and you could consider them as weeds, but actually they're of great value to attracting insects into your garden. Now, if you are a little bit more of a formal gardener, then you cannot go wrong with a wallflower. And this is the Ericium Bowls Mauve, and I've already got some of these in the garden, and they are fantastic for butterflies, for bees, and hummingbird hawk moth as well. So Ericium Bowls Mauve, guarantee that will grow very big, and for somebody like me who's not a very good gardener, that's actually a bit of a plant I know I can buy, and it will still be there the next year. They really go mad, and they're fantastic. So let me also give you some ideas, because the thing that I'm conscious of is that with the nice weekend coming up, everybody's going to be going to garden centres, and why not make choices for wildlife? So I'm not much of a gardener, as I keep saying, but this is my attempt at actually saving some money. So I've got some cosmos growing here. These are my babies. I cannot tell you how proud I am that I've actually grown seedlings. Whether they'll last anymore, I don't know. What I got in there? Lobelia. Well, that's just kind of like a border plant. I've got a foxglove there that's got to go in. And I've also planted echinops, which is what otherwise known as globe flower. And echinops, these haven't come through yet. Well, I hope they will, but that's another thistle. Very good for butterflies. So that's in my seedling section. Now, in the other areas, I'm going to plant some herbs, because herbs are really good. Apple mint, lemon balm, marjoram over there, sage, rosemary. I've got another wallflower, chives. Herbs are really good for gardens, but in some of them you need to pot them, okay, because of course with some of them, like the mint and that, will go mad. So I'm going to just put pots with my herbs. This is going to be St. John's wort over here. Now this is seeded. It's not night stocks there, beg your pardon. So that's scented night stocks, that's seeded there. So that's going to be Hopefully they'll come up. They did last year. I've got a jasmine there. Now that isn't necessarily a night flowering jasmine, which I may need to get one of those as well, but certainly that smells beautiful. And as I'm talking to you, I've got a red mason bee just going on the beehive there. You see them? They're beautiful little things. Around the garden, you may have noticed in my photographs, I've got loads and loads of forget-me-nots, and they're just self-seeding, but they're brilliant, and they're another good wildlife flower. But of course they're so numerous that you can just pull them out when you need to put something else in its place. I'm going to have wildflowers in this little strip here, so I'm going to get some seed in, and I've got some alliums growing up there. I like alliums. Then this is another one. This is not everybody's cup of tea, but absolutely fantastic for bumblebees. And this is comfrey. And they haven't quite come out yet, but it's a white flower. And I guess I think it might be a herb. I can't remember now. Just try to. Don't smell herby, but I've got a feeling it might be a herb. I might be wrong. But it's, to all intents and purposes, you could say it's a bit of a weedy thing. But trust me, it is probably the #1 plant in my garden for bees, for bumblebees. So comfrey is fantastic. I've got a daisy here. It's not a Michaelmas daisy, but it's similar, and that is really good. And I also have, of course, a buddleia. No wildlife garden is complete without a buddleia. Spirea is another one. Which is commonly, once that flowers, they'll have lots of insects on the spirea. And hebes are also very, very good in your garden. This is one my mum's given me, a penstemon, which she says gets lots of bees on, so that's there ready. And then in the hedge, I've got a honeysuckle and something about this, pyracantha. And the bumblebees go mad on the flowers in the pyracantha. In fact, you can see... Oh, sorry. Is it pyracantha? No, it's Cotoneaster. I beg your pardon. I think it's Cotoneaster. So they're almost out, those flowers. Possibly some of them are out. And that will be full of bees, as well as the honeysuckle. And like I say, dotted around, I've got the forget-me-nots, which are great. That's a particularly nice area over there. But I am going to pull some of them out to put in my... Ericium, my wallflower. And here I've got the fuchsia. There's 3 fuchsias, and of course the fuchsia is one of the really important plants for attracting the elephant hawk moth. Now, I've not had an elephant hawk moth in the garden, and that I've noticed anyway, and I think one of the reasons is I've never had fuchsias in the garden. They love fuchsias. So this is the moth that has that very large caterpillar with a big eye. Loads of people come across them. In fact, the last time I saw one, I think I was about 9 years old. So although you might get them yourself on a regular basis, for me, it's actually a target species. So that's why I've planted fuchsias. Over here at the back, I've got my other Ericium wallflower, Bowles Mauve, and that was where the orange-tip butterfly was on the other day. That was really nice. I've got another buddleia that's coming up through, and behind that I think there's a honeysuckle that's not doing very well. And then I've got this buddleia, which of course is, as you can see, is a very established plant. Now you can't kill buddleia, and this buddleia has been moved about 4 times, and sometimes it spends 2 months on its side, not even in soil, and yet you stick it in the ground, it still carries on going. But that will be a lovely buddleia bush, and buddleia is known as the butterfly bush, and this is the buddleia davidii, which is the purple one, and is very popular with various butterflies, particularly peacock butterflies, as well as a load of moths at night. It's amazing how many moths go on the buddleia, so I'm very, very excited about this particular plant, because it's going to be nice and big, it's going to be accessible. In fact, I think I'm even going to get a couple of little walking stones across the garden. I used to call this the butterfly garden, this particular area, and sometimes it is, some years it's not, it depends. At the back there I've got lavender. Lavender is very, very good for bees, really good for bees. And then this plant here, I can't remember, I think it begins with P, I can't remember what it's called, but it's one I got from Waitrose a couple of years back, and to be quite honest with you, I've hardly seen anything on it. It looks very pretty, I like the leaf on it, but I might move it, because I kind of want this garden to be about value for wildlife. And the same here, I'm not exactly sure what that is. I don't think that's a fuchsia. It's another plant that, well, we'll see what happens there. Behind there, I believe that might be a lobelia. Got a couple of those in the garden, and then I recently put a little gooseberry plant over there in the corner for a bit of fruit. That's going to go up the fence. There's another, I think that might be a cotoneaster, and then we've got this beautiful rowan. And rowans are actually very important trees for berries, for birds in the winter, and obviously when they have pollen from the flowers. They're fantastic, and it's quite interesting to see. This one hasn't come out in flower yet, but it's interesting to see the amount of insects that were attracted to this rowan. But also rowans are known for being very spiritual, and going back hundreds of years ago, the rowan was lauded as a very spiritual tree. So this tree is very much alive, and of all the plants and in the garden, this is the one that I kind of feel a connection with, and I must be honest, I do kiss it from time to time, and I hug it and I talk to it. I know it's a bit mad. I talk about tree hugging. Well, if I hug a tree in my garden, it's this rowan, and I don't know what it is about this tree. Maybe it's because I'm a little bit impressionable sometimes, but if it's spiritual, that's good enough for me. So I've recently fed it, and I talk to it, and as I say, I try and look after it. And it is actually, I've moved it last year, which I didn't like doing. In fact, I did something else yesterday. I was digging the garden, I dug into one of its roots, and I found myself apologising to the tree. What am I like, eh? Now, another little thing I've done. See this here? Let me take it from the other side, it's easier to see it. Okay, so we've got the grass there, and there's my butterfly garden, and there's my solar thing there for the light. But look, that's grass. You know, like, why didn't I cut that? Well, the reason I didn't cut it is because actually insects do hide in grass. Moths during the day hide in grass. So that's just a little patch there for them to go into, and it's just another little habitat. It's a mini habitat. It doesn't look out of place. The garden's still tidy. If you look at my garden, well, it's a work in progress at the moment, but you know, the garden's tidy, but this is the Wild Owl TV garden. It's a wildlife garden, but you know, you don't have to have a messy garden. People, I think, very often think that because when you say to them about having a wildlife garden, I think they just assume that you just let the grass go completely long, and then you just got a messy garden. It's not. It doesn't have to be like that. It's just about using your head and saying, right, okay, then, how can we benefit wildlife, but at the same time use it for ourselves? And you know, there is easy ways of doing it. I'm by no means Mr. Green Planet Man. I have to live a modern life, and I'm certainly not a perfectionist, and I got plenty of flaws, but I just make an effort for wildlife. I'm kind of like middle of the road, and you know, let's be honest, not all of us are prepared to bang drums and you know, absolutely change our lifestyles. We're modern people, and we have our material things that we have, but that doesn't mean to say there's no room for helping nature. And I think particularly in, you know, where we live here in Yate, South Gloss, it's an area where we're perhaps living busy lives. There's lots of cars, there's lots of people playing PlayStations, you know, there's lots of, you know, modern trappings, but you know, you can add to that, because for a lot of people, they're absolutely missing a massive source of enjoyment. And of course, I know lots of you are getting a lot of pleasure from my videos. I get lots of feedback now, which is really nice. And trust me, if you just sort of looking around and you know, take some of the things I've got here as a little bit of an example, you would get such a lot of pleasure from creating your own garden, and you can still have your modern trappings and do all your things you want to do. And just because you've got bees in the garden doesn't mean to say you can't step outside the back door, because actually it doesn't work like that. I think people are a bit scared of it, even bats. They think bats are going to fly in your hair. Rachy. Rubbish. I've got a friend, Rachel, she's just paranoid about bats, paranoid about, you know, most of these creatures, they just don't want to hurt you, they just want to live and survive, and blimmin' hell, so many of them are bloody dying. So anyway, getting distracted there, I am banging my drum there, aren't I? This is another plant. This is a Himalayan, what's it called again? I forget what it's called now. Himalayan something or the other. Himalayan honeysuckle is what it is. And it actually was supposed to be a good plant for birds. I had it in the ground, but it just took up a corner and I didn't like it, so I thought, put it in a pot. What have we got over here? Right then. Wisteria. Wisteria is going against the sky there, you're not going to get very good contrast there, but this is a plant that is going to be coming out of flower soon. I can't say the wisteria is of massive value. I think I get bees on there, but it's not. It's pretty though. It does its job. The apple blossom definitely does provide nectar, as does the apple itself. And there's a apple moth that we get in the garden as a result of the apple trees. And we also have crab apples. Aren't they beautiful? Look at this. Again, the very small trees. If you want to put a tree in your garden, get a crab apple. Look how pretty that tree is. Really, really nice. And it's not very big, so you can pop one anywhere, but that's a very important wildlife plant. It's a food plant for species. It's also obviously provides important nectar at this time of year. If you're brave, then get yourself hawthorn. Now, all along this hedge, I've got hawthorn. Look at the needles on that hawthorn. It is a very, very thorny bush, but I'll tell you, fantastic for burglar protection. If you line your fence with hawthorn, nobody's going to jump over your fence, because I'll tell you what, those things go in you like hypodermic needles. But hawthorn is a fantastic wildlife plant, and it's actually the food plant for lots of different butterflies and moths and things like that. It's really high value for insects. So hawthorn's brilliant. I got some laurel in there as well. Kind of wish I'd put a lot more hawthorn and blackthorn and sloe in there, but I'm going to plant some extra ones in there. Over here in the wildlife area, well, recently I've planted some seeds, and that is night-scented stocks are going to be here, because this is my moth garden. I've already started putting fruit out, and this is some leftover melon. I've just bought some banana today to put out here, and we've got in this area, which is, say, a great area for wildlife. I've got the pond there for the little nursery pond. I'm going to put see what comes up through, and then I'm going to start putting some more sheets of corrugated down in the next week or so, probably. But I've got bramble, nettle, there's a mahonia there, which is a winter flowering tree. So that's why I bought that mahonia, and that's got quite large. That's basically providing nectar for early bumblebees that come out in the very, very early part of the spring. I've got an old buddleia here, which did flower last year. And I say about buddleia, I mean, you can't kill this stuff. It looks like it's dead, but trust me, it actually isn't. If I put that in the ground, that will start to leaf and will come to life again. And then over in this particular area, it's not particularly planted for wildlife because of the fact that it's a rockery. But there are obviously nectar flowers, but it tends to be more of a slug diner, this area. Got some heather over there, which is good for the bumblebees. And then, oh, by the way, all along here I've planted nasturtiums. So all along in these little tubes I've got nasturtiums. Nasturtiums are like, well, they're perfect for me because I'm not a very good gardener, and they are actually brilliant because they flower very easily and quickly, and then the small white and large white butterflies then lay their eggs on there, and the caterpillars eat nasturtiums, so it's a very, very good plant for that. There's my wood pile by the pond, and in this area here I'm going to plant up, this needs digging over. I haven't got very far in my gardening today, but I'm going to plant this up with some seeds and wildflowers, and as I'm talking to you I'm just seeing a bumblebee, and there was an early mason bee or something there. And then along the wildlife border here, this border is deliberately left a little bit overgrown because lots of frogs live in there. Wood mice run along the hedge. There's ivy in there, which is great for the moths in the winter. There's maybe even a little bit of holly in there as well, I think, which is great for the holly blue butterfly. So I'm going to plant some more holly this year. But there's also spirea and hebes, a well-established hebe there. Not looking very good, that hebe. I'm going to have to have a look at that and see what I can do. This big tree I've got in the garden is actually an acer, and it's been there ever since we moved in, and it's okay, but you know, I just think it's great for a staging post in terms of birds coming across the garden. They're flying across there. It's a long way from one side of the garden to the other, so they can fly into the tree and then they can fly into the hedge. So there's a little bit of a island there for them, which is really good in a garden, to have a little staging post so that these birds can have somewhere to dive, particularly if a sparrowhawk's around or makes an attack. It just makes them feel more secure. But if only that was an oak tree. Oh, if it was an oak, I'd be a very happy man, because I'd have an awful lot more things going on in the garden. Oaks are just the best you can get. If you've got a little oak tree, I'll have one, by the way. If that would be a nice little thing, wouldn't it? Somebody knock on my door and or leave an oak tree for me. I'd love a little oak tree in this garden. Hello. What are you up to then? Having a little rest there. Where's Mum? I think Mum might have flown off somewhere. Don't forget pond plants. If you have a pond, pond plants are also of great value. And of course, for a pond where you've got plants and weeds, this is where the tadpoles will hide and newts will hide, and all the youngsters that hatch out of the eggs and the spawn and that, they'll be wanting to get under cover. So having lots of plant growth in your pond is also very important. The worst thing for an amphibian is to be swimming around in open water and not being able to hide from potential predators. And predators don't always necessarily have to be introduced. Things like great diving beetles will fly into your pond and then they'll start predating on creatures in the pond. I used to go scuba diving, and I always remember the feeling of when I was in the Red Sea, diving, going out into the blue to get back to the boat, and they had grey reef sharks and hammerhead sharks out in the blue, and it's kind of a little bit like that in a pond. So finally, along here I've planted some jasmine, which is brand new plants, and I've got another plant there, I forget what that is now, this little pot here was a messy pot, but actually there's a buddleia in there that's just kind of surviving. But there's also another plant in here, and this is where I had a grey dagger moth. I never did manage to identify this last year, but we had a grey dagger moth caterpillar on this plant, munching away on it for a few weeks. And I thought, where the hell did it find that plant? But it must be a food plant for the grey dagger, which we couldn't quite establish what that was. And finally, just to finish this video, roses. The leaf cutter bees often will cut the roses to use for that, the leaves for making their egg cells, their nesting cells in the beehives. So lots of ideas there. So just to finish off, like I say, this weekend, bank holiday weekend, lots of you will be going to the garden centre, and I'm guilty of it myself in the past. You just get drawn into buying the same old things. But if you think about what you'd like to do, this is your opportunity to increase the amount of creatures, particularly insects, that you'll get in your garden through some clever purchasing of wildlife friendly plants. And you'd be surprised, you could go into a garden centre with £10 budget, £20 budget, £80, £100 budget, and you could buy a load of things that are non-native, and it probably won't make an awful lot of difference to lots and lots of species. You might get some bumblebees feeding on nectar, but with a lot of what I've got in my garden, it's food plants for butterflies, which means they'll lay their eggs on it, and then you'll get caterpillars, and then you'll get a lot more butterflies and moths. And plants that our British bees have evolved to be able to feed from British species of plants. So you take some species from some far off country and put it in your garden, and of course garden centres have got lots of non-native or hybrid species. Not only are they often not very nectar rich, but those that are, our species haven't evolved to get into them, to get to the nectar, because it's foreign insects that are evolved, and it's just that way of thinking. So that's why you can never ever do better than native species of plant. So look for the wildlife species, and like I say, locally Iron Acton I thought was brilliant. They got these wildlife plants, but apparently they sell out of them really quickly. So as soon as you see this video, it'll be too late to go there tonight, but get down there tomorrow morning and grab what's left, because it'll all be gone and they probably won't get any more. And look at the Butterfly Conservation website for ideas, look at UK Safari for ideas, even the RSPB website for ideas, or if you want to message me, I can copy and paste you some of the stuff that I have on my lists of top plants, and then that will give you some ideas. And search out these species, be very specific, because you almost need to go by the Latin name for some of these plant species, because you might get a jasmine, but it might not be a night flowering jasmine. So if you want to attract moths, you need to have one that comes out at night. And there's all these little subtleties, and I've wasted my money in the past buying plants which I thought were the right plant, but it's ended up being the wrong thing, and I wonder why nothing goes on there. In fact, my honeysuckle is an example of that. I thought the honeysuckle was going to be great, but it's okay, but it certainly isn't as good as other species, and it's because I got the wrong variety. So you need to get the right variety, which is why very often these websites will give you specifics. And there's loads and loads of gardening sites, wildlife gardening sites on the internet. Even just little people that are really experienced, and they've got their own little pages with. They're not little people like a foot tall, they're probably 5 foot tall, but they're people that are just doing their own little thing and spreading their knowledge on the internet. And they're often really, really good places to get some inspiration from. And you'll find the same plants will crop up over and over again. Tobacco plant, greater knapweed, bird's foot trefoil, all those sorts of things. So I hope you found that interesting. This is a crucial time of year to make these decisions now, because we're all buying for the garden and we're all going to be letting these plants grow and establish. And I guarantee that if you follow this advice, I guarantee you will see more butterflies, more moths, more insects, and even possibly more birds in your garden than you've ever seen, compared to if you go and buy a load of rubbish non-native or hybrid plants. So keep that in mind. Thanks for watching Wild Art TV. Bye.